I'm Allie. I'm from the Economics Tutoring Center at ASU, and I'm going to be talking about when firms leave the market in a perfectly competitive industry. So what we know about a perfectly competitive industry is that the price is set at some equilibrium. So we have our market supply and our market demand, and this price would be set at $5. And this firm is a price taker because this market is perfectly competitive, so they have to use this price of $5, and that price becomes their marginal revenue curve. And if this firm wants to find their optimal output, they would set their marginal revenue equal to their marginal cost and find that they should produce an output of 10. So to determine whether this firm is making a profit, we have to find their total revenues and subtract their total costs from that. So to find our total revenues, we're going to multiply the quantity that they're producing times the price that they're going to charge for that quantity. So the price that they're charging is 5, and that's set by the market, and the quantity that gives them their optimal output is 10. So total revenue equals 5 times 10, which is $50. And that's shown by this area right here, total revenue. So now we're going to find our total cost. So what we have to do to find total cost is multiply the average total cost by the quantity, because average total cost tells us on average how much it costs to produce 1 unit of output. So to find the average total cost for the quantity 10, we go all the way up this line until we reach this point where it intersects with average total cost, and we find that the average total cost of producing 10 units of output is 20. So this price is 20 and the quantity is 10, so we can multiply those two to find our total cost. So that tells us that the total cost of producing 10 units of output is $200, which is also this rectangle right here. And just by looking at this, we can see that this firm is operating at a loss because their total cost is this rectangle and their total revenue is this much smaller. So profit would equal this total revenue minus the total cost. So total revenue is 50 minus the total cost is 200, and that gives us negative 150. That tells us that this firm is losing $150 when producing at this quantity. So now we want to determine whether the firm would stay in the market in the short run. So to do that, we need to look at their total variable cost, and we find total variable cost in the same way that we found total cost. So we need to look at our average variable cost of producing 10 units of output, and that is $10. So to find total variable cost, we multiply this 10 times this 10, and we find that the total variable cost is $100, which is shown by this area right here. So now we want to look at whether our total revenue is going to cover our total variable cost. And we have this rule that if total revenue doesn't cover variable cost, this firm will leave the market in the short run. So we can see that their total revenue is 50 and their total variable cost is 100. So this firm doesn't have enough revenue to cover their total variable cost. So they would leave the market in the short run. And what happens is, if they're producing 10 units of output, their revenue is this much, their total cost is this much, so their loss would be this big. But because they have to pay some of their variable cost as a part of that loss, if they produce 0 units of output, the only thing that they would be paying is their fixed cost. So instead of losing $150, they would only be losing their fixed cost, which is their total cost minus their variable cost. So in the short run, this firm would produce 0 units of output and lose $100, rather than producing 10 units of output and losing $150. So now we're going to look at another example where the firm is still making a loss but would stay in the market in the short run. So first we're going to do like we did before and find our total revenue. And how we do that is we figure out what their optimal output would be. So in order to do that, we find the point where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So that happens to be right here, and we can go down and see that the quantity equals 10. That's their optimal output, and we can find their revenue by multiplying this price that's set by the market by the quantity. So this firm is making a total revenue of $50. And now we can look at what their loss is going to be. So we do the same thing as we did before. We look at the quantity 10, go up, and find the average total cost of this quantity, which is 20. So that tells us on average it costs them $20 per unit. So we can find our total cost by multiplying the average total cost by the quantity. And that gives us a total cost of $200. And now we can find the loss associated with this. So profit equals total revenue minus total cost. So again, this firm is losing $150. So that tells us they're making a loss, and that loss is equal to $150. But we need to see whether or not this firm would stay in the market in the short run based on their variable cost curve. So when we're finding our variable cost, we have to multiply our average variable cost by our quantity. So we look at our quantity and go up and see that the average variable cost would be $3. In our previous example, we could notice that our average variable cost was higher than our marginal revenue. But in this example, it's lower. So we find our total variable cost by multiplying the average variable cost times the quantity. And we find that our total variable cost is $30. So when we're looking at whether or not the firm would leave the market, we have to look at the different options that they have. So if they produce 10 units of output, they have a revenue of 5 times 10, which is $50, and they have a total cost of $200. So what we see is that they have a loss of $150 shown in their profit equation. However, they would stay in the market because their revenue is higher than their variable cost. So their revenue is up here and their variable cost is here. So they're able to pay all of their variable cost and some of their fixed cost, giving them a loss of this area, which is also equal to $150. However, if this firm were to leave the market, they would only have to pay their fixed cost. So fixed cost equals total cost minus total variable cost. And their total cost is $200. Their total variable cost is $30. So their total fixed cost is $170. That is shown by this area right here. So if this firm were to produce 0 units of output, they would be losing $170. But if they produce 10 units of output, they're only losing $150. So this firm would stay in the market in the short run, even though they're operating at a loss. So in this video, we figured out how to determine whether or not a firm would stay in the market in the short run in a perfectly competitive industry. This is mostly based on the placement of their average variable cost curve as it relates to their marginal revenue curve. So if you need more help with economics tutoring, you can watch the other videos on this channel or come into the ASU Economics Tutoring Center. Thank you.